I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
A single document slid across a polished oak table inside a sealed palace room, and the air changed before anyone even spoke. Silence didn't fall, it collapsed. What followed was not discussion, not hesitation, but a confirmation so final it seemed to diserase every expectation built over years of quiet planning. Princess Anne had formally confirmed Catherine as the sole trustee of the Crown Estate, oversight structure, a decision that fractured the balance of influence and left Camilla's inner circle stunned into stillness. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. No one in that room moved as the weight of what had just happened settled in. Charles understood exactly what had been altered, because the Crown Estate oversight, the structured system that governs how royal land, revenue, and long-term stewardship decisions are managed, was never meant to rest in a single set of hands. It was designed for balance, not concentration. And now that balance had been rewritten in one stroke by Anne, whose reputation for constitutional precision had always made her decisions feel irreversible. Camilla did not speak at first. Her expression tightened, not in anger alone, but in calculation, because her camp had expected shared influence, a carefully distributed arrangement that would keep power circulating within established circles. Instead, Catherine's sudden elevation disrupted every assumption. Catherine herself remained still, absorbing the reality that she had not requested but was now bound to carry. Around them, advisory staff exchanged brief, uneasy glances, each one realizing that the structure they relied on had quietly shifted beneath their feet. Princess Anne confirmed it again, without raising her voice, her authority cutting through the silence, as she reaffirmed Catherine as the sole trustee authority figure linked to Crown Estate oversight decisions. There was no embellishment, no softness in delivery, only finality. A senior aide, unable to hold the tension, closed the briefing folder with a slow, controlled motion and stepped out of the room without a word, the door clicking shut behind him like a seal on something irreversible. William had not been part of the room, yet his name entered it moments later when a private summons was issued for him to review the implications of Anne's confirmation before it reached wider circulation. That detail alone changed the atmosphere again, because if William was being pulled in this early, it meant the decision was no longer confined to approval, it was moving toward consequence. Princess Anne placed the signed document flat against the table, her fingertips resting briefly on the official seal before she withdrew her hand. She did not explain herself. She did not need to. The room understood that what had been decided was not open for revision, only interpretation. Catherine felt the weight of every gaze without looking up, while Camilla remained motionless, processing not just the loss of expectation, but the sudden clarity that something far larger than influence had just been reassigned. But the question that now grips the palace is not what was signed, it is why Catherine, and why now. Inside the private corridors of power, silence carried more weight than speech. Princess Anne stood at the center of it, unmoved by pressure, her presence cutting through every layer of hesitation, like something final had already been decided. Catherine remained still, caught between disbelief and responsibility she never asked for, while Camilla observed from a narrowing space of influence that felt smaller with every passing second. No announcement had gone public yet, but inside the palace, everyone could feel it. Something irreversible had already begun. Camilla did not speak at first, because words would have given shape to a fear she was still trying to control. Her advisors had already begun whispering the same concern in private briefings. Influence over estate decision channels was no longer guaranteed, and the Crown Estate, oversight, the system that governs royal land and financial stewardship in simple terms, was no longer operating under the familiar balance she once relied on. Princess Anne had always been trusted as a stabilizing constitutional force, the one who steps in when tradition risks becoming unstable, and now that trust had reshaped everything in a single direction. Catherine, meanwhile, was still absorbing the reality that her role had shifted beyond expectation. Her quiet shock, visible in the way she avoided looking directly at anyone, as if the weight of Anne's decision might become heavier if acknowledged too soon. William stood apart from the immediate circle, reviewing briefing notes without a single comment, his silence more revealing than reaction. The future king, the heir who would eventually inherit sovereign responsibilities, read through each line as if measuring consequences rather than opinions, careful not to signal approval or resistance too early. Around him, tension moved differently now. Staff no longer spoke freely, and even small pauses in conversation felt loaded. A private advisory meeting that had been scheduled hours earlier was abruptly postponed after the confirmation of Anne's decision circulated internally, leaving unfinished sentences hanging in rooms that suddenly felt unsteady. Camilla sat alone later in a dimly lit private room, the kind used when conversations are no longer meant to be heard. A folded internal memo rested in front of her, its contents already reshaping alliances she had spent years navigating. She stared at it for a long moment, then slowly turned it face down, as if refusing to let it define her reaction. A staff member quietly entered, paused, and then exited without waiting for instruction, understanding that no guidance was needed because nothing in that moment could be corrected or reversed. Yet none of this appeared overnight, because the real turning point had already happened weeks earlier, behind closed doors, before the confirmation, before the silence, before the shock even had a name inside the palace corridors. Everything was already shifting in a room no one outside was meant to understand. Beneath Windsor's restricted administrative wing, Princess Anne stood at the center of a confidential constitutional review session that carried more weight than its calm surface suggested. One decision taken here would not be questioned later. It would simply become reality. Princess Anne did not begin gently, because she never treated governance as ceremony. The constitutional review, meeting a structured internal process where senior royals evaluate long-term authority arrangements in plain terms, not tradition or symbolism, was already under strain the moment Catherine was unexpectedly invited to observe portions of it. Catherine entered carefully, aware that her presence alone was unusual. Yet she did not yet understand why silence in the room felt heavier than words. Camilla, still positioned within expected influence channels, had assumed any outcome would preserve a shared structure of estate oversight, but that assumption began collapsing the moment Anne questioned whether distributed control could survive long-term pressure without fracture. Camilla did not speak, but her silence was not comfort, it was calculation. Every detail she had relied on for stability was being examined in real time, and the more Anne spoke, the more that stability weakened. Princess Anne raised concerns not as theory, but as conclusion already forming, openly, questioning whether the existing model of shared oversight could continue without creating internal conflict at critical decision points. Catherine listened without interruption, but inside her, the realization was building that she had been brought into something far larger than observation. She was being positioned inside a decision that had not yet been named. William remained outside the immediate exchange of dialogue, but within reach of its consequences, having been briefed indirectly through internal notes that arrived without ceremony. The future king, the heir expected to inherit sovereign responsibility, understood enough to know this was no routine adjustment. This was structural. Meanwhile, a senior clerk moved quietly between document stations, witnessing Anne begin drafting a recommendation that carried a weight no one in the room challenged. Camilla's influence, though still present in theory, was no longer actively shaping the direction of discussion. It was being evaluated, rather than consulted. Princess Anne completed the recommendation with deliberate control, naming Catherine as the sole trustee authority candidate, in language that left no room for alternative interpretation. A senior clerk watched closely, realizing this was no longer a draft of consideration, but a document moving toward permanence. The clerk later described the moment in a recorded internal account, noting how Anne paused for half a second before signing the directive, as if measuring not doubt, but consequence. Then the pen moved, and the decision became final. Camilla only learned the direction of the outcome indirectly, when internal circulation channels activated without her prior consultation, sending the document forward into validation pathways designed for confirmation, not debate. That absence of inclusion mattered more than the decision itself, because it meant the structure had already moved past negotiation. Princess Anne placed the signed directive forward with quiet finality and spoke only once, her voice cutting through the silence without raising volume or emotion. "This is settled." Catherine did not respond, not because she disagreed, but because she understood she had just crossed into a role that could not be reversed or softened by explanation. William's name surfaced again in internal briefings moments later, not as participant, but as necessary witness to what was now unfolding beyond containment. From that moment forward, confrontation was no longer avoidable. It was only a matter of when it would erupt. The confrontation did not belong to ceremony, nor to public record, nor to anything the outside world would ever see in real time. It formed instead inside a sealed meeting room, where 5 chairs carried more weight than any direct crown announcement. Princess Anne entered first, her presence already setting the tone before a single word was spoken. Catherine followed, carrying the quiet shock of someone who had been placed at the center of something irreversible. Camilla arrived last, and William remained slightly behind the threshold, watching without interrupting what was about to fracture. Camilla did not sit immediately, because sitting would have meant accepting the shape of the meeting as final. This emergency internal review meeting, a restricted session called after Anne's confirmation, circulated through palace channels in simple terms, meaning an urgent reassessment of authority decisions already set in motion, had not been designed for negotiation. It had been designed for acknowledgement. Catherine felt that weight immediately, her hands still, her breath measured, as she realized she was now being formally recognized as central trustee authority under review terms, a designation that placed her at the center of oversight decisions without precedent to guide her. The emotional pressure of that recognition sat heavily on her, not as pride, but as uncertainty she could not yet name. Camilla finally spoke, and when she did, her voice carried controlled restraint, but the challenge underneath it was unmistakable. She questioned the procedural legitimacy of what had already been circulated, pressing the idea that such a decision could not stand without broader agreement. Her advisors had already briefed her that influence within estate decision channels was shrinking, and now that fear had taken shape in real time. Catherine did not respond immediately, because the sudden elevation still felt unreal in her body, as if she had been placed into a role faster than her emotions could catch up. Across the table, Princess Anne did not react to Camilla's challenge at first, as if she had already heard it in advance and discarded its weight before it was spoken. William remained silent longer than expected, and that silence did not go unnoticed. The future king, the heir whose eventual role would involve sovereign decision continuity, was not avoiding the moment, but measuring it. Each second he did not intervene shifted the atmosphere further. Princess Anne finally reiterated her confirmation, without revision or hesitation, her voice steady and unchanged, as if nothing about the situation required reconsideration. That lack of movement from her altered the entire balance of the room, because it confirmed that no argument would reopen what had already been set. Camilla leaned back slightly, and for the first time, her composure shifted into something more procedural than emotional. She requested that her objection be formally entered into palace protocol logs, the official record system where institutional disagreements are documented for accountability in simple terms, meaning the monarchy's internal written archive of decisions and disputes. William's silence continued even after that request, and that absence of immediate response signaled something sharper than hesitation. It suggested alignment was no longer predictable. Camilla pushed her chair back just slightly, enough for the sound to cut through the silence, and repeated her request for the objection to be formally recorded. Princess Anne did not look up. She did not adjust her tone. She only responded once, quietly and without emotion. Noted. Catherine felt the weight of that single word more than any argument spoken before it, because it confirmed that disagreement had already been reduced to documentation rather than influence. William finally shifted his gaze, but still did not speak, and in that restraint, the room understood something was changing in real time. But the real question was no longer about disagreement. It was about who now held the power to finalize reality. Power inside the monarchy is rarely declared, it is assigned, absorbed, and accepted long before anyone realizes the shift has already completed. In the wake of Anne's confirmation, silence inside the palace was no longer calm. It was operational. Internal estate governance structure, the system that manages royal land oversight, and financial authority, in practical terms, meaning the framework that decides how control flows through royal property decisions, began reclassifying itself without announcement, without ceremony, and without hesitation. Camilla did not see the resistance at first, but her team felt it immediately. Requests that once moved through smoothly now stalled without explanation, delayed by procedural reviews that appeared suddenly stricter, almost as if the system itself had changed its standards overnight. Her advisors reported blocked approvals across multiple estate decision channels, and each delay carried the same quiet message: access was no longer automatic. Meanwhile, Catherine's advisory role, which had once been supportive and observational, expanded into formal trustee-level recognition pathways, placing her into structural proximity of authority she never actively pursued but now had to carry. Catherine felt it in real time, not as triumph, but as pressure. Every briefing that reached her desk carried expectation, layered over responsibility, and the speed of institutional adjustment left no space for emotional pacing. She did not request this expansion of authority, yet it arrived fully formed, as if the system had already decided before she had time to understand it. Camilla's influence, once stable and predictable, was now meeting friction at every procedural layer, and that friction was no longer accidental, it was structural. William remained quiet in public posture, but increasingly present in internal briefings, where his position began to matter in ways that were not immediately announced. The future king, the heir whose eventual role would include oversight, continuity of sovereign decisions in simple terms, meaning long-term responsibility for ensuring institutional stability, began quietly supporting Anne's structural decision framework. He did not announce alignment, but he also did not challenge it, and that restraint carried weight inside rooms where silence often meant consent. A senior clerk made the first visible break in routine when a Camilla-linked authorization arrived for processing. Instead of routing it forward, the clerk paused, reviewed the revised internal structure, and refused to proceed without escalation review. It was not defiance, it was acknowledgement that the system no longer matched its previous logic. The refusal rippled quietly through the administrative chain, creating hesitation where there had once been certainty. Then a sealed directive arrived confirming Catherine's formal trustee designation was being finalized through internal validation channels. The wording was procedural, but its effect was absolute. This was no longer interpretation, it was confirmation in motion. The palace did not announce it, but it also no longer needed to. A palace administrator answered a routine internal call, paused mid-conversation after reading an updated routing notice, and slowly lowered the receiver. For a moment, no one spoke on either end. Then the administrator said it plainly, almost detached from emotion. It's no longer routed through that office anymore. That sentence traveled faster than any formal announcement, because it explained everything without needing permission. And once that realization spread, the fallout could no longer remain contained. The first visible fracture did not come from ceremony, announcement, or even disagreement. It came from silence, so heavy, it felt deliberate. Camilla's scheduled engagement briefing was suddenly revised, without explanation, as if the structure beneath it had already changed and no one had bothered to inform her. Staff avoided eye contact. Documents that once carried her approval line came back unsigned. Across the palace, internal estate oversight adjustments meaning the formal system that controls how royal property decisions are reviewed and approved in practical terms, were already being implemented as if the decision had always existed. Camilla felt the shift before she was officially told. Her position inside key approval channels no longer responded the way it used to, and every delay carried a message that was never spoken out loud. The emotional weight of sudden procedural exclusion hit harder than confrontation would have, because there was no single person to challenge. It was the system itself turning away from her. In another wing, Catherine sat frozen as aides delivered a formal briefing outlining her new, trustee-level expectations, a role defined not by ceremony, but by responsibility over estate, governance decisions in plain terms, meaning she was now expected to handle decisions once distributed across multiple senior layers. Catherine did not react immediately, because reaction required understanding, and understanding had not yet caught up with the speed of what had been placed on her. The pressure was not political in her mind, yet it was personal, almost disorienting. She had not requested this expansion, yet it arrived complete, structured, and already active. Each sentence from the briefing carried more weight than the last, not because it was dramatic, but because it was final. Camilla, meanwhile, experienced a quieter kind of collapse, one not marked by confrontation, but by absence. Key approvals she once expected to move freely, now stalled without explanation, and that silence replaced influence faster than any argument could have. Princess Anne remained entirely absent from reaction, refusing all media engagement and declining clarification through official channels. That absence was not retreat, it was reinforcement. Her decision did not require defense because, in her view, it had already completed its purpose. In a late-night office, William reviewed revised governance structures alone. The future, King the heir whose eventual role involves overseeing continuity of sovereign decision, frameworks, in simple terms, meaning ensuring institutional stability across generations, reading each adjustment without interruption or commentary. His silence was not confusion, it was calculation. Camilla experienced the next rupture when a staff member entered her office, removed a folder from her desk without explanation, and left before she could ask a question. For the first time, she did not stop them. She did not ask where it was going. That moment mattered more than any briefing, because it marked the point where expectation no longer demanded explanation. Then came the communication blackout around Camilla's advisory office. Lines of internal coordination that once carried routine updates simply stopped responding. Not delayed, not redirected, cut. The absence of response became its own form of message, spreading faster than any official statement could have controlled. But the most decisive shift was still to come, not in offices, not in documents, but in a private exchange that changed everything. In a quiet corridor, far from ceremonial halls, everything felt stripped down to something more fragile than protocol. William and Catherine stood without witnesses, without aides, without the safety of structured language to soften what they already knew. No formal setting could contain this moment, because nothing about it was formal anymore. Catherine carried the weight of a decision she did not choose, while William carried the awareness that Anne's decision had already reshaped the monarchy's internal balance beyond reversal. William did not begin with reassurance, because reassurance would have sounded empty against what had already changed. The trustee responsibility Catherine now held, meaning formal authority over estate, oversight decisions in plain terms, the structured control of royal property governance, and other dos and lieu, approval flow was no longer theoretical. It was active, it was real, and it was already influencing how internal systems responded to her name. William had begun to quietly align with Anne's structural reasoning, not out of agreement alone, but because the stability of the institution now depended on accepting what had already been set in motion. Catherine exhaled slowly, and the doubt in her voice was not about legitimacy, it was about endurance. The emotional pressure of institutional dependency pressed harder than she expected, because every expectation placed on her now came without preparation time. She admitted it carefully, almost as if speaking it too loudly would make it heavier. The system was already moving around her, already adjusting to her presence, as if she had always been part of it, and that was the part she could not yet reconcile. William listened without interruption, weighing not only her words but the consequences of what refusal or collapse would mean at this stage. William responded with a restraint that carried more honesty than certainty. His acceptance of Anne's decision framework was no longer abstract. It had become a practical reality inside internal briefings, where alignment was being measured quietly, not declared. He understood Camilla's position was destabilizing, but he also understood why the structure had shifted toward consolidation. His support was not loud, but it was steady, and that steadiness mattered more than opinion in moments like this. Catherine saw that in him, the absence of resistance, the presence of recognition, and the quiet acceptance that nothing about this moment could be undone by emotion alone. Catherine lowered her voice, the question breaking through the controlled silence between them. "What if I cannot carry this?" she asked, not as defiance, but as honesty shaped by pressure she had never experienced before. William paused, not briefly, not casually, but long enough for the silence to become part of the answer itself. He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted away from strategy and into clarity. "Then you already are," he said, not as comfort, but as recognition of what had already been proven by the system itself. The words did not resolve her fear. They redirected it, because what William was acknowledging was not future capability, but present reality. Catherine did not respond immediately, and in that silence, the weight of Anne's decision became something neither of them could step outside of anymore. William remained steady, but even he understood the unspoken truth. Acceptance had already replaced choice. Then the moment fractured. A notification arrived, quiet, abrupt, unavoidable, signaling that public awareness was beginning to leak beyond palace control channels. Catherine saw it first. William saw it a second later, and neither of them needed to speak to understand what that meant. But once the palace stops keeping secrets, the outside world begins to respond, and it always responds louder. The first headline did not wait for confirmation. It forced its way into the morning like a crack, splitting glass. A broadcast anchor froze mid-sentence, voice tightening as the tone of the segment shifted without warning. What began as routine coverage of royal affairs turned into something sharper, heavier, irreversible. Outside Buckingham Palace, the air changed within hours. Small crowds gathered first, then larger ones. Phones lifted, cameras locked in, and what had been contained inside palace corridors finally broke into the public world with full force. The broadcast did not soften its language. Early media reports began describing an internal royal restructuring linked to Princess Anne and Catherine, and the phrase alone carried weight before details even landed. The trustee restructuring, meaning a formal reassignment of oversight responsibility for Crown estate governance. In plain terms, the system that manages royal property and financial decision control was no longer an internal matter. It was now public conversation. The monarchy's internal authority balance, once assumed stable, was suddenly being questioned in real time by people far outside it. Palace communication teams moved fast, but not fast enough to control the direction of the story. Statements were drafted, rewritten, and delayed as new fragments of reporting emerged, faster than official response could stabilize them. Inside those teams, pressure was no longer about accuracy, it was about containment. Camilla's supporters reacted with visible confusion and concern as the narrative expanded, beyond anything they had anticipated, struggling to understand how influence, once considered secure, could appear so suddenly uncertain in public framing. Then came the line that changed everything in how the story was understood outside palace walls. A national broadcast described Catherine not as a background figure in reform discussions, but as a central trustee figure in Crown estate oversight. The phrase spread instantly, repeated across commentary panels and news tickers, turning a structural internal shift into a public symbol of power realignment. Catherine's name was no longer attached to possibility or transition, it was now attached to authority already in motion. Outside Buckingham Palace, the reaction turned physical. Crowds gathered near the gates, not in protest, not in celebration, but in collective curiosity shaped by uncertainty. People pointed at screens, replayed segments, argued over interpretations of what had just been confirmed. The monarchy, usually insulated by distance and protocol, was now being discussed in real time on the street, where interpretation moves faster than clarification. A senior commentator, speaking during a live panel segment later that morning, leaned forward, with unusual seriousness, and warned that what was unfolding may represent the most significant internal shift in decades. The statement was not sensationalized, it was measured, deliberate, and that made it heavier, because it came not as speculation, but as assessment. A television presenter at the center of the broadcast paused mid-sentence, looked down at a fresh update, and the entire tone of the segment shifted again. With a controlled breath, the presenter said, "We are now confirming Princess Anne's decision has already taken effect." No embellishment followed. No recovery. Just confirmation delivered into public space, like a final lock clicking into place. And with public awareness fully ignited, only one question remained: what this moment would ultimately mean for the crown itself. When the noise finally settled, what remained was not chaos, but clarity so sharp it cut through every assumption that had once held the monarchy in place. Princess Anne's, as confirmation of Catherine as sole trustee, did not simply redistribute authority, it rewrote the meaning of authority itself. Camilla's camp, once confident in a shared balance of influence, now faced a reality that no internal briefing had prepared them for. And Catherine, standing at the center of it all, was no longer treated as an addition to the structure, but as part of its foundation, as if she had always belonged there. Catherine remained steady, even as the Crown Estate oversight structure and the formal system, governing royal land and financial stewardship, in simple terms, meaning how royal assets are managed and approved, settled permanently under her trustee authority. That alignment did not arrive with celebration or ceremony, it arrived with finality. Princess Anne's decision had become more than a directive. It had become the defining constitutional moment of internal reform, the reference point against which every future adjustment would now be measured. Anne's silence afterward only deepened that permanence, because nothing she said or didn't say suggested reversal was ever an option. Camilla adjusted to the shift in a quieter way, but no less significantly. Her influence did not disappear, it recalibrated. Boundaries formed where there had once been open access, and decisions that once moved through familiar channels now required different paths entirely. Her supporters described it later, in a recorded internal briefing, as a narrowing, not an ending. But even that phrasing could not soften the emotional impact of losing assumed continuity. Around her, the institution had not rejected her presence, but it had stopped revolving around it. William observed the transition without interference, his position stabilizing the change rather than contesting it. The future king, the heir, whose eventual responsibility includes ensuring institutional continuity in simple terms, meaning maintaining stability across royal governance systems, had quietly aligned his internal understanding with Anne's framework. That alignment mattered because it prevented fracture at the highest level. Catherine noticed it too, not as approval alone, but as quiet recognition that the system had already accepted her role as permanent. Catherine accepted the weight of it with a restraint that surprised even those closest to her. There was no visible triumph, no public expression of elevation, only the quiet understanding that responsibility does not announce itself before it arrives. In a private recorded reflection, later shared through an internal advisory archive interview, she admitted, "It felt less like being chosen, and more like being required." That distinction defined everything that followed. Anne, meanwhile, offered no further public comment. Her silence was not withdrawal, it was reinforcement. The decision stood on its own now, no longer needing explanation or defense. In palace terms, Silence from Anne functioned as confirmation that the matter had fully transitioned from decision to structure. In the final internal alignment review, the monarchy did not describe the change as expansion or reduction. It described it as consolidation. Authority that had once been distributed across overlapping influence points now centered itself into a clearer, more direct form. And in that consolidation, uncertainty diminished, but clarity became unavoidable. Catherine stood alone briefly after the final briefing ended. The room was empty, except for the weight of what had just been finalized. She placed a hand on the edge of the table and exhaled slowly. No words, no ceremony, no acknowledgement beyond presence itself. Only acceptance, settling into place, not as emotion, but as reality. This moment marked not a scandal, not a dispute, but a structural turning point in the monarchy's internal identity. Power did not fracture, it reassembled around a new center. And in that reassembly, Catherine's role was no longer questioned. It was established. And for the first time in years, the monarchy did not feel divided. It felt decisively reset. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.